I forgot to press the button. There we go. There's no Randall.
Sorry, he's still on a learner's permit.
Right. After 2 years. There you go. Right. Or has it been more? It's been more than that now. Blimey. Right. Anyway.
Yeah, it is actually. Counting the Zoom days.
Yeah. Right. We're all here. We're online. I guess let's go through the introductions quickly, and then we can get on with things, right? So,
yeah. Okay. Apparently, we have a lot of future.wait jokes going on here.
Yes, we were a bit late, right?
Yep. All right. Be nice, be respectful, be decent. You know the drill. Don't post anything that's adult, rude, offensive, against common sense in other ways. Don't advertise or promote your business. You know, we all know you need a job. Don't spam the same questions over and over again. We do have a system where questions are moved to the bottom when they come in. If your question comes in a second time, we'll move it to the bottom again. A good way to make sure we never get to your question. Harassment of any kind is not tolerated. Failing this code, you will be blocked from the chat here. You will be blocked from Slack, and we will give your names to the folks in the Discord, and suddenly you won't be able to get anywhere. Last but not least, have fun.
Indeed, have a good time. I will also mention that, make sure you post your questions with a Q in front of them, and then we'll find them in the chat.
Yep.
And also, we are missing our question magician today, Randall. So he's away having surgery at the moment, and we wish him all the best and a speedy recovery, so he can come back on the show and help us with our button pressing.
Hopefully they in the chainsaw, because it can be really painful if it's dull.
Okay, yeah, let's move on. Right. Anyway.
For those who don't know, Randall is having a hip done today.
Well, let's do some introductions. My name's Simon Lightfoot, Flutter Community Lead and CTO at Dev Angels London. And you can follow me on Twitter at Dev Angels London. Scott
Stahl, also community leader, organizer GDG Cleveland, writing apps under Good Dog Apps, and making trouble otherwise. Having fun. We have somebody else, don't we?
Yeah, we have a few others. Danielle, welcome again.
Hey there. Yeah, thanks for letting me back after hitting the shiny red button and ending the broadcast last week. Sorry.
Not sure if we should let you back.
Forgotten. No, we're not supposed to have her here.
That's it.
I
had to rush. We all understood this. As soon as you rushed off at it, we were like, hang on a second, what happened? Oh, oops, quick, make a new stream, get it all back up and running. So I think everyone that was watching came over to the new stream. For those that don't know, there's a part 1 and part 2 video linked together on the channel if you want to go watch the fun times.
Yep. Sorry again about that. All right. So I'm Danielle Cox. I'm the Flutter tech lead at a startup called Ardly. And I also am one of the organizers of the Flutteristas. And I guess today I'm like number 3 on the stream. Yay.
And we have a number 4 joining us. Hello.
Yes.
Renuka.
Hi,
how you doing? It's been a long time.
I'm good. Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
I want to know, how did the DevFest London go? Oh, sorry. Do you want to introduce yourself? What about it?
So I'm Renuka Kelkar. I'm a DevRel advocate at Invertis, and along with this, I'm an organizer for GDG London. So you missed this time, Simon.
I know.
We are waiting for you, when you are going to put your talk and other stuff, and we're just waiting, and last minute, Simon said, I'm not able to come today.
Now, if I remember right, and I do, Renuka, you are part of a 2 Flutter developer household, yes?
Yes.
There's another Flutter developer in that house.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It was fun seeing him in Berlin and Prague both. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. He's doing
taller than
really
you
good.
are.
A lot. I feel like very much smaller.
For those who don't know, we're talking about her son.
Yeah.
He's 6'2" now, so you can imagine.
But I think you might have had to buy. You probably had to buy him new clothes every other day. Like, he's gone from being shorter than me to being 6'2". Like, what?
He was about 5'10" when I saw him in Oslo last year.
Yeah. Now
he was shorter than that just before then.
That's true. But yeah, because of you all, he is doing very well in the learning Flutter and
Nice.
doing good stuff. So he has given a talk about how to use the Flutter with the Raspberry Pi,
Mhm.
and Roman has mentored him how to do all this stuff. So they have done really good work in the
Nice.
DevFest.
There's somebody else we need to get back on here as
For
well.
sure. Yeah, we for sure need to get Roman back on. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got to hang with him in Prague for the first time really in person. He's a great guy too.
Oh, that's cool.
Was
I
that the
didn't
first
realize
time
you
in
went to
person?
Prague.
Yeah, yeah. This was when you were leaving to go catch your flight.
Yeah.
All I was saying is I want to go back to my room and go to sleep. And he's like, oh, well, no, we need to go in. And I'm like, I need to go sleep. He says, we can take pictures. I said, okay, I'm in.
Last time I said I need to go to my room and get some sleep was shortly before Simon dragged me out of bed at 9 a.m. and I ended up in the middle of a fjord on a boat, finding out that the hotel needed me to check out of the room because I'd forgotten to check out. We're sitting there, Simon, about 400 meters from any land at all.
Oh, yeah. Oh, on the boat. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a lot of fun at things like Flutter and Friends. So for those of you who have not gotten out to these in-person events, you need to.
Yeah. DevFest
That's where all
too.
the fun happens.
Yeah, DevFest. I mean, just get out and be part of it. That's why Randall's having a surgery too, so he can start going
Get out of
again.
your fishbowl.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, as I was saying, get your questions in the chat. We also want to do some live coding today. There were some things that came up actually from a few people in the community that I wanted to for us to cover. There's actually some common layout problems, things that people have, and they're not easy solutions. So I thought we could give them a go. Yeah, let's see if I can dig out the
Also,
notes I've made.
Just to back up a little bit here, Simon and I had a conversation about this. The original idea for Humpday when we moved it to YouTube off of Zoom was that it was going to be something where we had a guest and do some interviews and then flip over and do some Q&A, maybe like 45 minutes or say 15 minutes of intro with news about Flutter, half an hour with a guest, and then about 15 minutes of questions. It's turned into sometimes 10 minutes with a guest, sometimes not even that, and 3 hours of questions. And we're getting feedback that not everyone's up for that. So we're thinking about cutting the questions down to a smaller segment and getting on with some good coding, or even doing them as two separate things. Cutting the questions at an hour with a hard stop and then moving on to a coding. But we will be cutting the questions down, knowing how fast we go through them. Probably going to limit it to 10 so that we have a chance to get onto that coding, and we are already at 5. So,
get your questions in.
Yep, we got room for 5 more queues if you ever want to see any code this week. So,
just getting set up here. Go on.
People love Simon's live coding sessions, right? We are very much used to with the dev camp. Simon run the whole day stream to do the live coding.
It was like a whole day, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's true.
I think it might be good to I might have to see if I can get the recordings and do some sort of AI remix edit, because no one's going to sit there for like 6 hours watching a stream, right? A recorded stream. So whenever I can get edited down, because the problem is like, most people don't realize like editing the videos is so hard. It's so not hard, just so time consuming, right? That's the problem. It's so time consuming. It takes a lot longer than you realize to just get everything together.
I think, Simon, we need to now gear up for the next dev camp. So we are planning in that. We need your help, like as always.
I just had the last one. It's like this every year. It's like, oh, we just did Flutter. We just did Joy-Con. Let's plan for the next one. It's like, can I have a holiday?
No, but people are asking, right? So people wants that. Though why not then? The next year with the next some new concepts, new structure for the dev camp, definitely. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
speaking of new structure, I am talking to everybody from Flutter to GDG to try to get them to do something more like the Flutter and Friends structure, where people spend at least one day just doing fun stuff together. You sign up for different activities. It was great. And also, I had already reached out to Alec and Lucas about planning the next one of these, and I was told at least wait until after the first of the year because they're still trying to recover.
I feel like Scott, like there should be like some kind of upgrade sessions from Flutter community. That would be really great because the AI coming in the picture, right? Everyone wants to do something new. So if we have some sessions where we can talk about how you can integrate the new things in Flutter, so that would be really great. Like people are looking for that, like some kind of fancy things or like a kind of features we can add it into our application. Something,
There we go. A good thing for the coding.
yeah.
Yeah. And also, if we don't want to, another interesting thing that we can do too is I had not mentioned this before because I hadn't had the idea, but I've been doing some AI stuff with an application called Cobalt CPP and also something called Horde or Stable Horde. And in essence, you can get access to free models. And I mean, you can run them for free on your home equipment if you have the power for it. And if you don't, Horde or Stable Horde is a lot of people who are running models and letting the public use them because text generation doesn't take much power at all. So a lot of people will just fire theirs up. I had a 34B running for a while. So if we need something for coding or whatnot, I can just fire up the LLM here and grab the external IP and we'll be good to go.
That's
So
great.
there we are. Write a Flutter app that talks to an LLM.
I was going to say you might think we're a little at risk on the question stuff without Randall here, but I wanted to call out Matthew Jones for jumping in to put the Q in front of the question if that's what you want. So thank you, Matthew. I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm going to take one off here to give somebody a chance at a substantive question, but the quick one here to get out of the way.
Let's put your questions in. Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing. The main ways to get a dash are usually to go to events and get one, usually like a GDG event or a Flutter event. If you are running a group, then you can sometimes get them from the Flutter team. In order for you to give most of them away, you can keep one. You do get to keep one. But other than that, really, I mean, you can't buy them. And
they've become quite rare.
Them.
They've become quite rare.
They are becoming even more rare.
In Berlin and in Prague, there was not just a way to just go grab one, like there have been in previous conferences.
Yeah.
Actually, Kenya either. Flutter Forward. In all three of those, there's not been
That's
like
crazy.
There's no claw machines. There's no nothing. So, yeah.
And that's, folks, that's even at the big official Flutter events. That's how difficult they are to get your hands on sometimes. Yeah, I was thinking another thing that could be really cool for an event is to do a simulcast, like at the party time of the event, and show some videos from the event, and then have a number of dashes, hopefully 10, maybe, and everybody enters a raffle. But the thing is, everyone who's physically at the event is entered and everyone watching the live stream is entered, so you have an even chance of getting a dash. It's a thought.
I mean, the problem is not everyone can get one, right? So it's going to be a problem no matter what way you look at it.
And it's taken some of us years to get a dash.
I gave like this is my original one. One of these is my original one. One was the newer one because they're slightly different, and all the other ones I got given out at events and stuff to give to people.
Yeah.
I still remember like when Simon, I went to the Kenya for the event, and Simon told me that Renuka, go get big bag with you and bring so many dashes for us. And I said I didn't get single one from there.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, you don't always get them.
Yeah, I've got two big ones, like the same two big ones that Simon has, and I've got one little one. I've given away my rest of them too. And
I've got one big and one little right there. And
Yeah.
I've got a couple of others, but they're still in the bags because they are for giveaways. They're not mine.
yeah, they're being held in
So,
escrow.
so Matthew, there was actually been people trying to sell dashes on eBay for stupid amounts of money, and it's really disgraceful. Not good.
Yeah, I guess they can do that. Yeah, because once they're giving them to them, they're private property.
Sure, but I mean, like at the same time, it's like you're not giving these for profit, right? You're giving these because you want to keep it, right? There's a difference there, right?
I think getting a dash, having like a little bit story behind that, you have achieved something or something, you have attended that event or something, that is going with that basically, rather than just getting a dash. Like,
Yeah, well, and the other thing too, though, the reason I want to open it up to remote people is not everyone can get to an event. Some people are in countries where there isn't even an event for 2 or 3 countries over, let alone counties. So, but as it stands right now, it's basically, you could reach out to, I guess, Neeli again. Because I know Neeli was working with someone else and she was doing more directing things for a little while, but I think she might have her hands dirty again.
Well, Anel's back, but I don't know. I would never tell people to just reach out to them just because I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, like for example,
I tell people
on Twitter.
I'm not supposed to have my Sparky.
I would say for people, reach out to your local Flutter meetup.
Yeah.
That's the best place to start, and then go from there, right?
If there is one, I'm talking about people where there's nothing.
Yeah,
but even if you can't go to it, they don't only have online things. There's other opportunities there, but yeah.
There are so many online events going on. People are give away the dash on the online event as well. People should attend that event to participate in that some competition and win the dash.
They had some dashes at the Silicon Valley Flutter meetup that happened during I/O.
Yeah.
And they also had put a couple of Sparkies out. So I grabbed a Sparky.
Yes.
And I found out from Puff later that they were not supposed to put those out. Those are never given away like that. Those are given away because, they notice you and they say, hey, or you can, back in the day, you could have asked for one. And what Puff said is he said that they would have said, no, you can't, there's no way to get one. And they would have DM'd you and said, okay, where do you want me to send it? But he says that's not even happening anymore. So, so I offered to give mine back even, but he said, no, don't do that. But, but still it was he said that was not supposed to have happened the way I got my Sparky. So, yeah. I hate to say it. It is how connected you are sometimes. And you know what? Here's the best way to fix that is keep learning and keep putting stuff out there and get connected.
Yeah.
And just get involved with the community.
Yeah.
No, Danielle's absolutely right. A lot of times it's who you know, but don't stop the thought there, because when people think it's who you know, then, you have to be in this certain little group. No, anybody can join the group. You just have to make the effort to get off your butt and come out to these events or do things online. You just have to make the effort to interact with people, and then you become one of the people in the group. It's not a closed group. It's a very open group.
Sorry, just that. One of us. Anyway, go on. Let's get some questions.
I think I only know that because you, Simon.
Folks, okay, Pradeep, sorry, you've also already got one in there. As it is, we have 11 questions, so I've locked them down. Let's get to it here. First, of course, can you suggest any certification or course for Flutter? And first thing is, it has been a long topic of conversation, 6 years now. There is no certification. There will not be any certification. The big question, even way back when Flutter was in beta, was who gets to decide what makes up a certified person in Flutter, and Google didn't want to shove that onto people with some ideas, and nobody else really has the authority to. So, however, a course, just a general course, there are lots of good ones. Code
Matt
with
Carroll
Andrea
has some.
is one of the first ones.
Andrea, yeah.
Yep. You said Matt Carroll's got one now too?
Matt Carroll's got some course material as well.
Yeah. Let me I'll pull up a couple of
Matt
ones there.
stuff is probably worth mentioning because it's not necessarily going to help you with how a lot of other people do stuff, but it for sure will help you think.
Yeah.
You know, that he does not agree with a lot of people in the community, but he has strong reasons for why he doesn't. And if you understand those reasons, you're better off for it. Even if you choose to ignore them and go on somewhere else, understand them, and it's well worth doing.
Okay, there is the super declarative. That's Matt Carroll.
There are like many people from the community. They started they have published their own books as well. Like Majid has published his book.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Majid's book. Yeah,
definitely.
Oh, yeah. He owes me an autographed copy. That's right. I need to hit him up for that when he gets it.
And here's Andrea's.
Yeah. And if anybody want to learn from the experts like Simon, then definitely join our Flutter bootcamp. We do with every year we run 2-3 times this kind of dev camp. So definitely it helps the people.
That's that's a good point, but it's also a really good point that just watch Simon code a little bit.
Sure, definitely.
Especially if there's other of us around making comments, to different things on it. I mean, that's educational, and that's how you learn a lot of stuff.
Yeah. He also does. Matt Carroll does his Twitter Space,
which he just started a podcast on that too.
Problem is, Wednesday's always when I do this, so it's like I just don't ever get the time to do more stuff.
But he's got a podcast now, so you can listen to them.
Big caveat.
I mean, me to be involved though. Like he offered to have me on the show and stuff. As I just can't seem to find the time.
And I think for the learning purpose, if someone is want to try something new and they stuck somewhere, they should post it on the Twitter. Our Flutter community is really, really helpful. People are giving answers or giving suggestions, right? So that is also good part of learning, basically. To try something first.
Again, with Matt, as has already been said, he's highly opinionated.
But crazy smart.
Crazy smart. He was on the Flutter team. I had been having conversations with him a while back. He was one of the people involved in getting the Flutter UI set for Fuchsia. He was also writing a lot of the Android code that Flutter was using to interact with down in the channels. And he has a really, really deep knowledge of the inner workings down in the weeds.
But not just for Flutter.
Because, not just for Flutter. But the thing is that when you know things that detailed, that deep down, sometimes you have your own ways of doing things that are, as was said, he's got his reasons. Well, his reasons are because he knows the stuff. It's like so down in the weeds that nobody else wants to even look there. For the longest time, he was doing state management with Animation Builder.
Oh, of course, yeah. But now we use Listen Builder. That's the whole thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna take 2 seconds to tell a real quick Matt Carroll story. I didn't know anything about his opinion on stuff like that at IO19, and we're meeting up there in Palo Alto, and with a bunch of other people. And I basically said, okay, look, my big question is, at what point do I need to start worrying about using state management versus just that? And so I asked him that.
Just why?
No, versus using globals or whatever, to make it happen. I'm like, at what point do I need to, do that? And it was interesting because I don't think he'd fully formed his opinions, but still knowing that's one of his hot topic items now, it was just funny that I asked him that, the first time I met him.
Yeah, don't ask him about state management.
Right. Shall we see what else we
All
got on the queue? Let's get to these, and then we can get some coding.
We want to be able to get to some coding. All right. How to automatically update an app after it's been published without the user's request. 2 words, Shorebird.
I mean, yeah. So Shorebird is, I'm sure I can dig out a link quickly. Shorebird is.
Those who don't know, it was put together by Eric Seidel, and also working with him is Felix Angelov. So you have one of the 2 creators of Flutter and the guy who created Flutter Block working together on this project. So sorry, Simon, I was buying you some time to do something.
Yeah, no. So that's the website, shorebird.dev. If anyone wants to go to it and check it out. I mean, code push is over the wire and it is limited. You can't do everything with an update with code push. So where was the question gone?
I also would.
The banner had taken over.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's an aspect to this though that is no user has to ask for an update. It is automatically sent down by the stores, but you can't guarantee when. Like, because they have to be online. There's a few other things. Are they on Wi-Fi? Are they not on Wi-Fi? It will choose the best time to do updates, and also the user can choose to disable automatic updates, in which case they won't get the updates until they press and manually choose it. But that's the user's preference. You should always respect the user's preference, right? So at the end of the day is you need to be building your applications in such a way that you don't have to push updates all the time and not break things. That's the principle of the matter. Right?
I play Magic the Gathering Arena, and every week you have to go update. And so every week I have to go find it in the Play Store just to do the update for it, to go find it. Because at one point it's just, and it just kind of stops working in a weird way. So, if you need to make this updated, you can always block the current one at that point in time, plan that in, but that's not a good user experience.
Yeah, there's also another aspect to this. You just saying that just reminded me of, it's what do you call it? Like user burnout. They get, like every time they go to use your app, they're getting updates. They have to wait for an update. It's like they spend more time waiting for the updates than they do using your application. Then that's a really bad user experience. And then second of all, push notifications, another good example of this. Just oversending push notifications to users. This is an easy way of getting yourself blocked or uninstalled from someone's device, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And the same really goes for updates. If I'm getting updates all the time, I'm sorry, you're great, but no, So again, it's more about deciding on when you want to do these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also, like there's you have to understand that there's ways of building your APIs or building your code in such a way that's backwards compatible, that it knows. So normally a good practice to do and have your app allowing your app to be upgradable. So every app can be upgraded, but it's not effectively upgradable. And what I mean by this is when you deploy your application, when it first starts, it should check its storage, see what is the last version the app was running. I think we're in your headset, Scott. We're not on your actual big mic.
Right.
Okay. Just wanted to check.
I was told it sounds better. It was during the time that you were wandering around the world while we were waiting for you.
Anyway. So sorry, get back to my point. So when the app starts up, it reads from a config file that you can save or shared preferences, the last version the app was using, right? If it's not set, it's the first time you start the app, right? You can now know this. And then the next time the app starts up, if it's been upgraded, it goes, I'm now version 2, and previously I was version 1. Then it can run the upgrade steps of going from 1 to 2. You see? So you can actually put that little class, one function, and you run that when your app starts up. It can just do that. And this means that you can then say, migrate some fields, migrate the database, delete the cache. So it re-downloads things, whatever you need to do. And the same thing goes, same with an API or anything like that. You submit the version of the app with the API, or the version of the API you're trying to access, so that you can have some backwards compatibility in what you're doing, and you can service a wider array of users of different versions of your product. The reason for this is, again, this whole thing that you can do releases and not have to force people to install the latest version. And that's the difference between like a optional update and a mandatory update. And again, there's lots of ways of doing these things. There's not one good way. But yeah, certainly the Shorebird's code push, back to that point, Shorebird's code push is about pushing Dart code only. It doesn't push native code. And even then, you have to be probably, I don't know enough details about it. We want to actually get the guys from Shorebird on here. Actually, that'll be some of the guests coming up in the future. But the concern is that the store's wording is about like how big your changes are. You can push like minor updates, but you can't do major changes to your app without it getting approved by Apple, for example. So there's some wording in there, sort of agreements. You have to be careful. Anyway, yeah. It might change.
Also, a quick side note on the whole Magic the Arena thing, Magic Arena. I busted my butt and worked my way all the way up to Mythic one year, or one season, whatever it was. Then the very next one, they introduced those things that go on the cards that go on the side, and all of a sudden nothing would work anymore, and I couldn't get out of silver. And they were like, "Oh, all you have to do is spend a bunch of money on new cards." And I'm like, all you have to do is not see my login anymore, because I'm putting my money somewhere else now. You take all that time and effort and money and just waste it on me in one update, so I have to start all over again? No. Anyhow, how do you use a switch pattern matching to render a widget conditionally in the widget tree? I've been using it for business logic, just not sure how to use it in the tree. I'd make a method.
No, you can just do it
from within the tree.
I mean,
you don't
even need to do that. You just child switch brackets done. You know, like there's no magic there.
Yeah, we're talking
about
switch expression here, right?
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is, number one, are they talking about a child, or are they talking about in a list with children?
Wouldn't matter.
Switch expression just returns an expression ultimately.
Yeah.
So you can just use it.
Hang on. There you go.
Yeah.
so just quickly, like this is just some, ignore this code for a second, right? This is what we had before. But yeah, if you wanted to like say have a Boolean enabled, I don't know, choice. This is probably a bad example. Anyway, choice equals true. You could then have and say a switch statement in here. This is what you're talking about. Have a switch statement on choice.
Yeah.
This is a switch expression for those that don't know.
Right.
And then this needs to fill out all of its possibilities. So we're going to add true and we'll add false. As the two things. And then these just return widgets. So this would just be we can have a text saying true and a text widget saying false, for example, right?
Yeah.
The minute I do that, Simon looks at my code and says, you need to break that out of the widget tree because you shouldn't have that kind of logic in your UI. Which is why I move it up above.
This is really fine.
This example is totally fine because it's a UI thing. It's how I'm displaying based on that value. Figuring out what the value should be goes out of it shouldn't be in the widget tree. But how you play it is 100% a widget concern.
So that's true. And then if we change this to false, it says, there we go. Now it rebuilds and shows false. That's how you do it. There you go. Moving on. Next question.
Yeah, it's in the end, whether you do it inline or in a method, it's still in the same file, and it's not that hard. You'll get it. Once you get it, you'll be like, oh, that's all.
One more thing I would throw out there on that is the fact that if you're doing that and you've got one of those cases that needs to return 2 widgets or whatever, don't forget, if you're in a list, don't forget that you've got the switch of the spread operator that you can use. So that's a way. So a switch expression is only going to return one value.
Okay, should I just show this? Sure. I'll just show it here. So for those what we're just talking about is that, let's say this was say we had a column here with children. This is what I think was just being asked about. So this can return a widget. It can also return a list of widgets. So if we actually make this a list and this a list, and then you do ... that's the spread operator. So that's going to expand this list that's been passed back into this list on outside. So we can actually put multiple widgets in here. So we have a const text blah, right? So if I now put comma there's our 2. So
Yeah,
true
double
returns
comma.
false
Oh, no, okay.
returns that. So if I now save that, we should get false, and then change it to true. And
Dremel.
help reload, hopefully.
You guys. It looks like you got an extraneous comma on line 68.
No, it decided to 168.
On line 68.
No, that's fine.
There's a closing bracket there. It's hard to see
Oh, I
because
see.
of the
I see.
colors.
I got it. Okay, yeah.
Oh.
You're right. Sorry.
It sort of stopped running. It was I didn't realize.
Yeah,
the
I thought the
session
same thing about 66.
It crashed with the
5.
null. That was returning back early. So give it seconds to rebuilding.
See, I knew you could do this inside of a list. I didn't think you could do a switch statement for a child. I thought the only thing you could do was ternary operator.
It's just an expression.
So yeah. So it well.
And the other thing that's worth kind of just, if I'm going to throw out something else silly out there, is don't forget, sizebox.shrink is is your friend, because if you've got an option that you don't want something on there, you can always just do a
You don't even need shrink. You can just do size box.
I know.
But there is actually, for some reason, look, Dart compiler exited unexpectedly. I don't know what's going on here. This is actually
this would be a live coding thing that we can look into shortly.
No.
Apparently, the live coding has started early.
No, this is a bug in the compiler for visits for switch expressions. Check exhaustiveness. Null check on null operator, which this can't be null. So something's going wrong there. Anyway, I'm using an old version.
You didn't put a break in there though, wouldn't it? Try to do all of them? No,
it's not.
No, that's true. No,
and breaks are gone anyway.
So breaks are optional now.
Yeah, breaks. You don't need breaks at all anymore. In fact, actually, there's no way to fall through at all if you want to, right?
No, they can, but they have to be. So it's not fall through in the common sense that people know from C or PHP or some other sort of C syntax. You can have multiple case statements next to each other, and they all count as one case statement.
Right.
So it does kind of fall through in that respect.
Yeah,
but if you have a statement in any one of those case statements, it'll break them up into units. So be cautious of that one. It can be wild. Anyway.
Yes, Matthew Jones. They're optional. That happened about 6 months ago?
It was a while ago now. Yeah. You can just remove them. They have no practical meaning anymore.
Unless you have an empty. Unless you want to have an empty set.
Yeah. If you want to have handle these case statements but have them do nothing, then you put a break in there.
Yeah.
That's why it's optional. Right?
Yeah. So, for example, default. You might want a default that does nothing. You might say default : break.
All right. Next question. Shall we bring on?
Yeah. Sorry, we cut questions off a while ago, and we got somebody who's still throwing them out there like crazy. All right. I'm hoping to make it to more live events this year. Is there a good directory of upcoming Flutter events posted somewhere?
Yeah, there is a Flutter conference, something on the GitHub they have created. I think Lucas and other.
It's flutterconferences.com.
Yeah.
It's in the chat. Those that want it. There you go. There's also Flutter. Actually, did this go the way of the dinosaur? There used to be another site.
Yeah, the one with there was one with Flutter meetups.
No, it got taken down because someone tried to duplicate the It's a Widget site, and it got taken over the domain.
That was basically privacy problems.
Yeah, sorry. Anyway, that will do. Plus conferences. There you go.
So how many places you are planning to go next year, Simon and Scott?
Okay. I've got the next question up. How many? I don't have any plans. It's whatever comes up. I haven't made any plans. I'm specifically not trying to make plans for next year right now. So
yeah, I haven't. I'm going to be helping Alec and Lucas organize Flutter and Friends for next year. That should be in September. Other than that, I haven't really looked at anything just yet. Some of us are still juggling the possibility of doing one in the US. And also, I'm really tempted to put in for DroidCon again. For FlutterCon in Germany, which would be great, but I'm looking at the budget and I'm not sure if I have the budget to do 2 European trips within a couple of months of each other. And if I stick the lady at the house with dog walking duties for that long, I might not have a house to come back to.
Right.
So someone is like I don't know who is organizing the Flutter Global Summit. Who is like I have just seen yesterday that about.
Never even heard of it before now. So there you go. Who knows?
You're talking about Geekly's?
You're talking over each other. What?
Is FlutterCon next year going to be still in Berlin, or is it going to be one of the other DroidCons?
We'll see.
I was just looking at it. It's advertised on the website as being Berlin. I was looking at the DroidCon company site yesterday.
We'll see.
Simon knows something behind the scene.
Well, I mean,
I thought I'd heard something, so I thought I'd heard something. That's what I'm asking.
There are some things going around, but we'll see.
So I'm just going off what was on the website yesterday, but of course that could change.
I think Anyway, we'll talk about that. Right. Anyway, what's next here? It says
for fuller context. Would you recommend Flutter devs to become familiar with the forerunner of React for hooks, reactive patterns, general history?
He's saying, was it worth getting familiar with React because of the general history?
Because the reactive paradigm.
No. There you go. No.
I think I would say no unless you plan on also using React.
Yeah.
I mean, but not Flutter.
I mean, if you need to use like
hooks, patterns.
I was gonna say, if you need to use hooks, use Flutter hooks, right? Generally the reactiveness of Flutter is just the way the UI rebuilds.
Yeah.
Like the other patterns that it has are not related to React at all because they work in 2 different ways.
Well, hooks is related because I remember when Remy first wrote Flutter hooks, the guy who was behind React hooks did mention something complimentary, and Remy was really happy about that. But it's still, if you study Flutter hooks, you're getting the same principles.
Yeah, this was just saying, but with Flutter, not like obviously with the hooks package, it matches the React hooks. That's the whole point. Like they're similar, right? Mm-hmm. So that if you're coming from one, you can go to the other one. But what I'm trying to get is generally, you've got no benefit from learning React in learning your Flutter journey, right?
I mean, if you're going to learn those patterns, you may as well learn them in Flutter.
Unless you need to obviously learn React, then learn React.
All righty. Let us see here. Question. Let's say I have a gradient as a background of list view. You have a gradient as a background of list view. Is it possible to make this gradient gradually grow from one color to another as the list view grows? Always possible.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what he's asking, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah. I get it. There's a gradient in the background, and as they go through the index, as the index changes, the colors in the gradient change. So even though the viewport window, even though the background is actually not moving, as the items move through the list, the gradient behind the background would change, and that would mean that it would have to be plugged in and know the index.
Gradually grow from one color. No, it's not what he's saying.
It's
not what
he's saying. The gradient's a background of list view.
Right, but I think if we've got like a gradient from like blue to red, right, or whatever, that if I only have 2 elements, it only goes partway down that gradient. If I have 3 elements, it goes further down. I think that's what he's asking.
I think the problem here is the term "grow" is wrong.
Yeah.
So please reword, because list view grows. What do you mean list view grows? That doesn't make any sense to me. And list views don't grow. Like they don't change their size.
Okay. And Roman, part of what Simon is saying is a list view is pretty much by nature bigger than the viewport, so you can scroll it. So if your items are growing, you might technically be using a list view, but until you get too many to display, it may as well just be a column.
No,
so I was thinking that as you scroll, the colors could change.
No.
I think that viewport is always there, right? The gradient.
Right. To the OP, to the poster, repost your question and explain to us. And then we are moving on.
Yep. So Roman, you can get another Q in here. How to decrease the initial time of an app.
So I think it's about loading time. Yeah. Are you talking about web? Or are you talking about?
No,
exactly.
About anything.
The point here is don't load as much data. Don't do as much.
Well, in the case of a web app, that's not that simple because it's got a lot of background it's got to do without that.
Yeah, but no and yes, right? Because the point here is the only way you can do that is to not do as much, right? As in, the less you do, the less JavaScript has to run, the quicker it's going to start up. And then again, the less you have to load. Doesn't matter if you're a web app or a normal app. The less you have to load and download and process, the faster it's going to run.
Well, someone might have done a video on decreasing your load time on a web app back in conjunction with Flutter Forward. We could do on that. And so there are some things you can do in the case of a web world that'll help you around a little bit. And the web team is also working on stuff like that too. With like the idea of adding WASM support in more places, maybe creating the Flutter part of it in a CDN somewhere, so that first Flutter app may take more time, but after that they don't. So there's things that the team is working on. None of us work for Google. There's stuff that the team's working on. There's also some things you can do if it is a web app. But I agree also, the more you do, the more you load, the bigger deal it is.
I think if you're experiencing really long load times, you need to understand why you're taking that long to load, and that's what the profiling tools will tell you. You can look at those, use the CPU memory profiles, and see what you're doing during the period that your app is loading that you can slow down. I mean, the thing is, I'll give you a good example. You might be doing asynchronous work that's serialized. So you're waiting for one async piece to finish before you start doing the next, You're going to get a stair-step effect, right? You get this. You can see this. A good example is if you literally on any website open up the Chrome Inspector, you'll see the stair-step effect of all the stuff that loads when something has to be loaded before the next thing can take place. And that's really, I mean, it can do lots of things in parallel. Do that, So I think there's a question there about how you organize your asynchronous work.
Instead of doing asynchronous things one after another, we could always use the good old wait.
Future dot wait for multiple futures at the same time. But equally, if you don't need to wait for them, don't wait for them, right? A lot of the time, what you actually want to do when you're starting your app up is start that asynchronous work going. Your app continues to start up, and it has its initial values set to whatever it's had from its cache or whatever it's got when it starts up. And you have to go to the network and do things that might take a long amount of time. When they come back, then it updates the screen. Yeah. But it's just starting your app up with content. I think a lot of people, I'd say look at offline first. There's quite a few talks about offline first development, because a lot of people build their apps to be online only, which means when it starts up, it always has to go to the network. It always has to download. Yeah. So it's always going to do all this stuff when the app starts up, rather than if you had it on saved to your the data directory for your app, and it just loaded that when the app starts up. It's right there. It doesn't have to go across the network or anything. It's immediately visible to the user.
And to go along with what Simon said, if you don't have to wait for it now, don't wait for it now. You may need to wait for it later, but you don't need to stop the experience while you're waiting. If that's the case, then you can easily wait for it when you need it. Don't just wait for it and go with that.
I think there's also go on. Sorry.
We've got deferred loading on some components and stuff like that, right?
And sometimes people are like loading so many stuff together, so many animations, so many images. That is also making an app very much slow in the starting time, right? Definitely.
I mean, just using cache network image can also just use that package, which is
cache whatever you can.
Yeah.
And there are other packages that just by using them you get the caching. That they've already built in, so you don't have to do your own.
I would pose a question to anyone watching and say, do you show spinners to your user? Do you show circular progress spinners to your user? How can you not show those to your user? That's what you should be thinking about. How can I avoid showing spinners to my user? Because they should never see them. The spinners are there for the occasion when something goes wrong, like it has to take a long time, to let them know that it's still working. But effectively, things should be instantaneous, less than half a second to load anything. So there should be no need to show a progress spinner.
Unless your backend is design stuff such that you have to wait for responses every single time you do something.
which
Yeah,
would
but
happen if you were interacting with an AI model that is on a server.
Yeah, but no and yes. The point here is that you would show your existing AI conversation, for example, right? And your existing content. You're not like showing a blank screen with a spinner each time you're trying to do something, right? Like, again, it's a bit like that. Let's say you're interacting with an AI thing. You might pop up your typing in the chat, the indicator to show that something is occurring that's asynchronous, that's taking a long period of time. But it's not the same as halting your user on spinners, on progress indicators all the time. It's really bad user experience.
Alrighty, we're already an hour in and still have 5 more questions to go. Although one real quick thing, Matt, you're welcome. And what do you mean you didn't Google it first, Matt?
Yeah. Let's go.
All right. Moving on here. How to solve package inconsistencies when a package needs Kotlin version 1.8, but some need 1.7. Basically, this is basic dependency resolution.
So
happens a lot.
You can update your so first of all, packages shouldn't really depend on a fixed Kotlin version, but minimum or something like that. So this can also be down to the package dependence, to the actual library dependencies that you've got. You say package, I do wonder if this means internal packages or if this is like libraries that you're getting off of pub.dev. So there are considerations when building a library that have maybe not been considered here. But equally so, you're in this position where you're using, let's say, 2 pub.dev packages, different Kotlin versions, which is what I'm assuming you mean by this. And in which case you go with the highest, you force it up to the highest, and then you'll go fork the existing package that's the lowest one and upgrade it, and then send them a PR with the change saying I've upgraded it, and they could go release that. And then once they've upgraded it, you change your original dependency line from a Git dependency on your fork to now the package that's been updated with a new version. It's just what you're going to have to do, right? Or choose not to depend on that package anymore and choose a different one, or bring it in line and make your own thing. There's lots of options, right? But frankly, if you're depending on someone as a code and it's not correct, it needs to be fixed, right?
I'm just reading the next question. I am struggling with layering widgets, which is what's got me going, huh? Especially with passing functions. I'm just trying to understand that sentence. I had to put the function in the parent widget and update the state in the okay, so I'm thinking I had to put the function call in the parent widget, update the state in the actual function. Is there a proper way to abstract?
I think it's really difficult to answer these kind of questions without like some example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think we also might have a small language barrier going, but it's not a big one.
If you can't put links in the chat, so don't bother posting a link in the chat. If you post it, we might actually start suggesting that people post gists, and they can post the gist hash, because we can load them straight up in Dartpad, which is great. So that's maybe an option. But yeah, I'm not sure I see what the problem here. Layering widgets, passing functions. It's too. What you're saying here is too abstract to really give you a good answer.
I mean, is layering widgets a concept I'm not familiar with, or is that?
I think that's what I'm wondering. Like nesting widgets within it.
Nesting widget, I think so.
Okay.
It's
all right.
That's what I understand.
Well, so then it's not just functions; it's really anything. I mean, if you've got to pass stuff down, and that's why I think a lot of people do state management kind of things, is so they don't have to pass down stuff every time. So I mean, that's a case where a provider or something similar might work well for you.
Again, it's just not clear about what you're trying to get to here. So sorry, I think post. We
want to help, but we're confused by the way the question is written.
Let's carry on with the next one and then see how we go.
Listen, next one is also from Lesser. I hope I got that right. Are there any streams for intermediate Flutter devs to watch someone make an app, maybe on Twitch, that you can recommend? I think he's talking about what Jay used to do with generic typing.
Watch the ones here. There's streams on the live channel here for that I did for the Wow Shopping app. There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. Also, there are a couple of them on, the Flutter YouTube. I mean, it's not like Craig has ever done any.
The Boring Show has some good stuff as
The
well.
Boring Show has good stuff.
And his current stream is good,
Yeah.
Yeah. He's got a couple of them, doesn't he? I think he has one for Flutter and one of his own, or
it does. It does depends on what this guy says. What something to make an app. Maybe I think just stick around, watch the live coding that we do and other things. But the Wow Shopping stuff that we did is probably the best thing I can think of right now.
Yeah.
And it covers a lot of things in that.
The problem I tell you what we got. So I was talking about this just before. After last week's show, the problem we have with these shows and we do live coding is that it's watchable once. We get people coming back and watch them, but not many people are going to watch it down. I mean, how many of the people watching right now would come back and watch a recording of this show for 2 hours?
Mm-hmm.
It's just not practical, right?
Yeah.
So the point here is when you look at these like building an app, go look at the coding thing on Twitch and see who's building stuff. But most people wouldn't be like streaming building apps because it's just there's no value in that apart from the people that instantly watch it live, and that's going to be few and far between. So this is why I was saying that earlier. If we can get the content that we recorded for the Wow Shopping app maybe and edit it down, then maybe that has some value. But
maybe we can create it in the series of something like a first part it's UI and then half there's something like that. Maybe that.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And since you're specifically saying make an app, I'd always be curious as to what do you mean by that? I mean, pretty much any code is going to be ultimately making an app. So is there part of it that you care about?
See, this is another thing. I love this thing because people say like make an app like it's easy.
Yeah.
I always say I see this often. I'm like, I've been doing it for like 15 years.
Yeah.
Nothing about it is easy.
Nope.
Right?
I get it. Make an app. Okay, great.
It's easy to write. It's easy to like with Flutter. It's definitely been made easier than it's ever been before. And if you think Flutter's hard, you should try some of the other stuff pre-Flutter, right, or other platforms, right? So the fact that that you can code something in Flutter and see it, that's just one part of building an app. As we talked about, updates. There's like the marketing, the icons, the graphics, the managing your back-end system. There's actually running the business. What do you do with finance? What system do you use? How do you do in-app purchases? Who send your tax returns to? I don't know. Like there's just it's running a business as well as building an app, right? Like it's huge. There's many parts to it, right? So I just want to throw this out there. Like a lot of people just go, I'm just going to build an app, and you have to know what you get into. It's not just typing some code and pressing go.
And regarding your streams question, there is the observable Flutter playlist. Mm-hmm. It's only got about 45 hours and that's on the Flutter team's site. So these people actually know what they're doing. Only 45 hours is not much.
I mean, it's sort of like Boring Show. Part of it's the fact that he doesn't know what he's doing and he's figuring it out. I mean, that's actually an important part of it is kind of that journey. And then, so he has guests on, experts in different areas and stuff like that. So
bouncing back to the layering widgets when we've got some clarification now. Trying to make small child generic widgets, but struggling with passing functions as parameters, especially if it's update. Oh yeah, okay. That's that goofy one, Simon, where you have the function in the parent. You pass it to the child as a parameter. Yeah. When the function is executed, it's actually executing the one in the parent because it's a pointer.
Yeah, you
just pass it. So I'm trying to pass in functions as parameters, especially if the function updates state. I mean, I'm not sure I get the problem here. You just pass a function, and that function contains set state, which I think is what he was describing in his first.
I had an interesting bug last week that I was banging my head against a wall about, where I was displaying basically like a snack bar or toast kind of thing, but doing it with our own design stuff. So I pulled it up, and so I had the set state, and then was telling it to open the thing, right? And I had inside of that I had a timer and the close. right? And so if you're looking at it, that closes inside a set state, but it's really not, because when the timer executes, there is no set state, and so it wasn't closing, and it wasn't notifying anybody, it wasn't doing anything like that. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and of course, eventually, when I was rubber ducking with somebody, I'm like, wait a second, it's not. There is no set state. And they're like, of course there's. It's right there. I'm like, no, there's not. This is happening later in a different function call. Exactly. So, anyways,
now Simon said about just pass the function, but I realize from a more beginner's point of view that might not hit home. Don't pass the actual function. What I'm saying here is, if there is a variable in your widget called my number, don't pass a actual print open paren my number paren and then pass that. What you want to do is make a function called print the thing. In that function, it says print my number, and then you just pass print the thing
without parents.
Not the whole. And the thing is that when the child calls it, it's going to call the function that is in the parent called print the thing. It's a difference between.
We can show this in a minute.
Yeah, we'll show it. Stick around, Lazo.
Just leave it on start, and we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Leave it there. Start. Whatever.
You want me to leave it start? Okay, I started that one.
Yeah. I've got one more question.
All right, I love the way you preface this, Danny. And this is the last question before we get to some coding. Without starting a discussion on state management, just curious, why do you think Flutter doesn't have the binding context concept that Xamarin has? Just one prop that links your widget to an object instance.
I mean, it does. I'm not sure.
Was it?
I think I don't know enough about binding context, to be fair, Danny. So I'm not gonna. The whole idea of context, build context, is to make that link so that you can actually link builds taking place so that things rebuild correctly. So when you say find dependencies and have inherited widgets, things rebuild automatically. You're registering against them. But there's equally, there's lots of other solutions for that. I mean,
you could use like a global key and get to the state from that. I'm not sure I recommend that, but you could do that.
I mean, I don't know enough about binding. I mean, what is it that I'm kind of curious, Danny?
Yeah.
What is that binding context? How's that principle work? Because you're saying you've got this class and it's just one property. Context is just one property on state that we have in Flutter that links your widget to an object instance, and that's what it does. So I'm not quite sure I get. So let me just be clear, Danny, just so you understand. There's three trees in Flutter. You've got the widget tree, the element tree, and the render object tree. The element tree sticks around, and that's what your context is, right? Okay. It's a property you set to an instance. Let's say a view model instance.
So that may be a key.
But that's what a widget is.
Okay.
I mean, a widget is your properties, your configuration for an instance, which is your element. So if you set a text label, let's say, to a property in the view model instance.
Once again, you're asking.
That's literally how you use widgets.
Sounds.
I think the problem here is
pass a variable to them.
I think the problem here is that this is always the thing that I think people see. You build a widget and people think that is the end result, and it's not. That's the configuration. That is just the view model. Think of this: all widgets that you type in your widget tree are view models. They have zero code in them. They're just parameters. The blueprints. That's the word. Yeah. But it's that kind of principle
for what you want to do.
And it's the elements and the render objects that actually do the work. The rest of it, the actual widgets themselves, just build more widgets, right? So if you change a property value on the view model, you call notify listener. Yes, and we have that. Yeah. It's a change notify value notifier. We have a bunch of
that's
exactly what those are doing.
Those are the pieces that do state management.
Yeah, we have that. I think maybe it's because you just like, and you talk about this like you can literally do that on state. The state object does the same thing. That's what set state does.
Mm-hmm.
Remember,
the mechanisms
stateful widgets aren't.
What? Oh yeah. The actual
Stateful
widget.
widgets are not actually stateful; they're stateless. It's the state object that has a state.
That just doesn't help anyone. But yeah,
I know. Plus, you have to see it in code for it to make sense.
But yeah, so it depends on, to get back to that, I mean, I'm presuming that you understand with a stateful widget, you can set state, and that does that. But otherwise, just because it's above you and you call like notify listener or something, it doesn't mean that this widget's going to get rebuilt. So you've got to do something also on that. You've got to register a listener. You've got to use a listenable builder, which is basically the same as an animation builder, like Scott mentioned earlier. Things like that. So calling notify listener doesn't automatically get a widget to rebuild, nor is it always necessary to get a widget to rebuild.
Well, you're notifying the listeners, but do you have any? Did you set any listeners up? So you got to have listeners to notify. I know.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all, folks. We are ready for some code.
Yeah, we'll get to some live coding, I guess.
Whoops, sorry. And yes, we do still have this one hanging here for the coding session.
Yeah. So
what do you think about doing something with a gradient and showing how a gradient behind a list view would work? And how?
Well, I was actually thinking that. But I also actually. So, do you remember when?
And actually, what if we did it with a method that would also address the other question?
Say again.
I was just thinking, this might not be the most efficient way in the world to do it, but what if we did this with the gradient using the approach that we were talking about passing a method down to the child and having that called? I'm not sure how we can work them both in together, and it's probably not a best practice and not an efficient practice. But we're just trying to teach something here.
Well,
we also need to say bye to Renica.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
sorry,
you.
you're gonna head off.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on with us.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for inviting. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you.
And have a good evening.
Tell the midget I said hi.
Yeah, say definitely.
It's always nice to have another Flutterista on with me. So thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
See you again soon.
So I just want to point out with this. In the cookbook, there's effects, and I think me and Matt Carroll did quite a few of these. And one of them is chat gradient bubbles, which might be a similar thing to what you were asking about earlier on the chat.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of examples in here, but this is it running. And the idea is that you're punching through into a gradient that sits behind everything. And it's very cleverly done. It's quite subtle, the two things. But it has a good, nice effect. It makes it feel like there should be one gradient, but actually, like a gradient on each one, but it's not. Anyway, does that kind of answer your gradient question? Because if it does, then we don't have to code it because, it's just there's the code.
You know what, though? It's something I haven't seen done yet, though.
What's that?
Having a gradient behind the list view.
I mean, sure.
You could use that cookbook to do it. Exactly. It's only list view instead of everything else.
Let me undo this. I wanted just to we've got a couple of things on the list of things that people we're talking about, so we'll try those out. And we also have a couple of things from last week. I think we wanted us to validate. Anyway, so just for those that don't know, last week we did this piece of code, and hopefully if it's running, it's not running. Of course it's not running. Well, I'll leave it for now. Actually, let's not do that. Let's hit stop.
Simon's code is broken.
Sorry, no, it's fine.
I said Simon's code is broken. Somebody mark it on the calendar. This is a rare event.
So this is actually all up on. We post all the live coding sessions that we do up on Gist. I'll put the link in the chat so you can see previous weeks. But this name tagging one, you can get to last week's one. It's where you can type in a box, hit at. I'll just hit play. Hopefully, it won't take too long to run. And then we'll start a new file here. I should probably date these. I don't know. Humpday, what's the 13th? 13, 12, 23. So whilst that runs, let's get this. So this is last little bit of code that we did last week, and the idea being that you can type in a box like you would do normally, blah 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 blah, and as soon as you type an @ you get a little drop down list where the text cursor is, and you can pick someone to put in, and it'll highlight that person in the chat. So again, @Simon, I can go back into the middle or something and do Scott. So that's pretty cool. And this is just really an extension on a normal text field. So if anyone wants to check out how you do that kind of thing. Funny enough, we actually used a widget called Portal, Overlay Portal. And that was just in is it widget of the week or something like that? It was just posted video about it, I think it was.
Yeah, last week someone was mentioning in the chat about what happened to widget of the week. And this week we got, so of the week part seems to be a little bit of a misnomer now, but they definitely
the team had a lot of stuff going on and a lot of new things being created too.
Well, it hasn't been of the week for a long time.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
but there is decoding Flutter and other things that take the place there.
Can you imagine if it was widget of the week and they started at like Flutter's second year? So it'd be like what, 52 weeks times 4?
So let's just run up. Right. What was that? So we had one which was about passing the functions.
Yeah. It essentially, trying to pass a function from a parent to a child and then call it from the child, if I understand it correctly.
I mean, sure.
If I were going to make a suggestion with that, why don't we do something where it's multiple widgets that have the function, and there's like an index or a widget or something you get from a for loop to show at that point how you could update any individual one with it.
Sure.
And Rifik, I'm sorry, that's not possible. I mean, we're not really here.
What's this?
It's somebody's asking about sharing their screen and getting personal help with code in the middle of the screen.
Or maybe code. And actually, we talked about that for starting next week. Maybe if you were to create a small Dartpad gist, you can share the hash ID with us next week, and we could maybe take a look at it if it's in scope.
So, just for those that don't understand how to do this, I'm going to show you this. So here's the gist from last week. You go to gist.github.com in your account. You publish your thing as a public gist, and you'll get this hash at the top.
Yeah, don't let Simon don't let this go in one ear and out the other. Pay really close attention to this. It's really good.
You can then go to Dartpad. You can then go to dartpad.dev and then put ID equals and that hash. Mm-hmm. And what you'll do, as you can see here, is that you can then run that code.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming this runs in the browser. I haven't tried. There you go.
So Dartpad goes and fetches your gist.
Mm-hmm.
Look, it even works in the browser. I haven't tried it. There you go. Right, and I'll go fetch it. So if you just post the hashes in the chat next week, we can go take a look at them, right? And we can actually take this a bit further, right? So all you need to do is publish your code to a gist, and then we can then also post back the fixes, in comments and stuff.
But that's not going to be this week.
I learned how to do that last week, so I could share last week's problem with Simon and company. So that was good.
All right. Let's see. So we had child. I don't know. So let's say we got. What do we call it? Button. We've got child widget. Let's do the usual button. I don't know. Button widget. Let's put a button widget. Sure. So this might be a Inkwell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the kind of usual suspects, right? And you might have like an on pressed, and you want to pass through that function. So here's the thing. I want to just show people this. So you can do this. So here's a function called onPressed, right? And we want to pass that in, add it to our parameters. And then we pass it onto this widget, and inside here we'll have button. I'm specifically not trying to use an actual button widget, just to show you what you would do, right? So button label, let's say. We'll add a label to this as well.
And then maybe we just make it like the counter app, but with 2 different counters.
I'm gonna check the YouTube stream real quick, because from looking at the comments in the chat, I'm wondering how much lag we have.
There is quite a bit of lag normally, about
Yeah.
a good few seconds. We'll see.
About 10 seconds.
Yeah, about 10 seconds. What was it doing? Yeah. So if we have button widget, now here's the thing that we want to do. Let's do this. So we're going to have 2 buttons. We'll make this one stateful as well, so we can have some state, and in here counter. So we'll come back to this in a second. You'll see. But let's do second. So I assume this is something, the kind of thing that you're talking about doing right now, right? So you could say something like this.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Right. So if we were to run this now, we'll see two texts. Let's do split these up a little bit. And let's do
And for anyone who doesn't know, we do 32.0, even though we could write 32, because when you're reading the code, that's how you know right away in your mind that it is a double.
Yeah, and I don't do that, but it's a good idea.
What was it doing?
It's for the human, not for the machine.
Right.
I'm just bringing up the font size of everything just so it's easy on the stream. There you go.
Yeah.
So
and then add the counter to the column, the counter value to the column.
Yeah. That'd be good. That'd be good, wouldn't it? So this kind of covers a few points that people have been mentioning on the stream, right? So let's just do this basic example. All right. Let's see. So we have 2 buttons. They're just text. And if I tap on this one, we get the little ink well effect, right? I'm actually letting go off the button. That's why it's not increasing, by the way. Buttons only action when you go up on the button, if anyone didn't know that. Anyway, so let's add some padding in here. And now there's some padding around the button, right? So these are 2 little buttons. Pretty basic example, but it works. Now, if I press on the first one, increments by 1, 2, 3, and the bottom one should increment in 2s.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's exactly how you send functions in.
Now, this is passing the function in line.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different aspects to this that we just want to mention. So first of all, each time this build method is run, it's building essentially a new instance of this anonymous function, we would call it, because it's not got a name, right? It's anonymous, right? So it could have parameters, but it's got no name, right? So here's the next thing you can do with this, right? So let's say we want to take this one step further. You can take this out of here.
Okay, let's talk about scope for just a minute here real quick. Because when you have an anonymous like that, what it's going to set the state on is the current build method. It's going to set the state of the current state object. So if this was in something else, it would not be refreshing the parent. It would only be refreshing this. And I think that's where the trick is,
well, this is what it's
because they're talking about using a child.
But hang on. Let's get to this point here, right? So if I take this out and we put this into let's say a function. Oops. Always put a type in your functions, please. Yeah. Increase count. Just for those that this is valid Dart, right? You don't have to put a function. The problem here is what this actually does when you don't put a type there is dynamic. It's implied dynamic. It means it can throw back anything. This also means that if you by accident return something expecting to see something, it may not behave the way you expect because it doesn't know to give you the error message because it's the wrong type.
The opposite's also true. If you forget to return something, And it expected it to.
And it won't tell you then as well because dynamic is nullable.
Then there's also a big discussion on, instead of using dynamic, just use object as your type, because it covers damn near anything. And the fact is, when you get down into the weeds, dynamic is not a type at all.
So, okay. So here you'll see we make a function called increase. It's made a generic function that can increase by any sort of amount, and it does set state on this local state object, for example, widget here, right? So now we could pass that across, right? And we just say we want a 1. So let me just show you. I'm doing this on purpose. I'm doing this on
Okay.
I'm waiting for Danielle. So this is what Danielle said earlier, right? You don't want to pass it. So first of all, if we had, let's put a number here and get rid of the parameter just for a second, right? So this could in essence, if this was dynamic, see, it's validated it.
Yeah.
Do you see the problem we've had?
Yep.
This is because OnPress has now accepted this as being a function. Because we could be returning a function from our function. Because it's dynamic, it could be anything. And then it'll crash when you tap on the button because then it doesn't match the type up and it'll break. So it's not telling us in the compiler land, before we actually run our code, that there's a problem because we didn't specify the type. Now, as soon as we specify the type that this is void, it goes, oh crap, that's wrong. But even worse than that is that this actually is running the function and not handing the function to the child because of the brackets at the end. As soon as we remove these brackets, we're now passing the function down to the child. This is perfectly valid, even if we had void or not, because it's not returning anything. It's passing the reference, that is this function here, to that child to be used in this variable called onPressed.
So do it here.
Yeah.
Well, and if we want to get a little bit pedantic on it, it could be valid the other way as long as that function returned a function.
No, we're not getting to second order functions. No. Anyway, this is going to confuse people, right? Anyway, but here's the point. So another thing to mention is that, so as I just said earlier, let's say we wanted to increment it by, at the moment, both these buttons are going to increment it by 1. I didn't hit hot restart, but both are going to increment by 1 each time now, right? Because they both call the same function. Let's say we want to increment by a different amount, so we can have our increase value pass it in. Well, how do we deal with this? Now another problem. We either do an anonymous function like this, and pass in our parameter. So that way, when this function is called, it's passing this function, this anonymous reference. This is just a lambda expression. It's the same as doing this, right? Yeah. It's just an expression on one line. By the way,
so
this is just
what it's saying
is
this
is just my font. So sorry, let me be clear. This is just the font doing this. Like, you don't have to type any special characters. Come on.
What that's saying is that I want you to return the result of that function. So even though it has the parent, it's still not going to execute it right away.
There's a difference. Let me be clear.
Right.
When you put brackets down, parentheses down, you're putting them down either to declare. At the moment, there's three reasons to use brackets, parentheses in Dart: to execute a function, to declare the parameters of a function, or to declare a record, a type. So the main ones, don't worry about records for the moment, but the main two is that you can only run a function if you're actually referencing the parentheses after the function reference. So you have to have the function name or a variable that contains a function, and then you put the brackets after, so it runs the function. It actually executes the function because you're supplying the parameters to the function. This is a declaration of a function because afterwards we have a block. So in this case, it's a block of code with coded braces, or the expression defines a block afterwards. So this is declaring these are the parameters. And let me explain to you this. This is just the same as having, say, int increase up here. You see, it's just the parameters to the function. However, the button widget does not depend on any parameters. Now we can sort this out, right? So if we I've just got disappeared, but if we let's say the problem with this is now, again, every single time the build is called, we're creating two anonymous instances of these anonymous functions that call increase count with 1. Like why? Right? So a lot of the time, this is required. This is called lambdas are perfect for this. This is glue logic. You're gluing one interface, which is the onPress has a void callback. It's a function that has no parameters, and we're gluing that to a function that requires a parameter. This is fine. This is perfectly logical behavior. This is the reason why all the buttons you'll see in all the framework are void callback. They don't have any parameters, so you can do exactly this. Because otherwise, if you needed different parameters, how could they code for that? They can't. So the idea is they just code for a function being run, and what you put in that function is up to you. However, since we own this widget and it's ours, we can optimize our code to be better. So in this case, in the button widget, instead of having an onPress, we can pass int increase as a parameter, right? We can call it whatever we want, int value, it doesn't matter, just a name. And then when we get our onPress, we need to pass it a value when it's being called. So here, this is where we push down our lambda. And again, we're using Inkwell, so it's going to require this. We can actually subtly do this slightly different as well. So you can also do, let's say, I don't know, let's do on tap here as a function. And then inside our on tap, this is where we can call onPress with our value or our increase, right? Let's call it increase. I'm using different names here just so that people can, just so that you can see as an audience where these things are being used. Normally use like the same variable name and stuff, right? So as you can see here, on tap is using this function. This function calls the other function passed in. I know this feels like it's complicated. And now the increase value that we want it to call back to, we can actually pass it in. So we can do something like, so these become, the increase value becomes a parameter to our widget. So these are the 3 configuration parameters to our widget. We've got our function to be called back with a value, the value to call back with, and the label to display. And here is the callback function that never gets recreated, right? This is a instance method on the button widget. So doing this now up here, we actually get called back with the value. So we can say int value like this, right? And call it increase as well. Now, if we were to pass that value on, we now have to send an error because we need to supply the value we want to increase by. All right, so that's set up. Now that's going to work, right? And
it's
what we actually
right? Sorry,
it's
not going to work right.
Why won't it work right?
Aren't you increasing now? I'm sorry. I'm wrong. Sorry. Never mind.
No, it's fine. 1, 2. There you go. See, it's working, right? Now, the point here, though, is we don't need to pass, because this matches the prototype, the type of the function that we need to pass in. We can just pass it directly to it.
Yeah.
So now we can pass this function reference directly to it. There's never going to be an error. So there you go. So now onPress becomes an increase count.
Yep.
So this probably would be renamed in this case to on increase. I don't know, maybe increase count. Yeah. Let's just do something.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Anyway. So then we're actually passing that function, the amount to increase by, directly to this function. So all of these achieve the same thing, right? There's no difference. I'm just showing you, like you were talking about how we pass functions. Yeah. So if I go down here, this is another point to this is, as I said, this is a callback. What you probably want to do, this syntax, you can actually write void. This is actually dynamic at the moment. That's actually, there's our definition of what the function is, and that's the name that we're giving the variable that holds that function reference. This syntax is quite confusing to some people. So you can actually type define these. So you can actually have increase, let's say we do increase count
Callback.
CB callback, and we can define a type. Increase count callback. And we can say that is equal.
Yeah, CB. Yeah.
So we can say that is equal to this type. And you can see just dropping that into there and putting it there, right? It's just a macro, if you will. Now, there is actually some that are built in. And so void callback is one that you'll probably see. If I show you that one, you'll start seeing something here. Here's void callback. Oh, look, it's a void function that has no parameters. There's a frame callback, one with a duration. There's a timing callback. There's a bunch of them that are all built into the framework. So some other popular ones are value changed. There's a value setter, and the way you work this is with generic. So that you can see it works. So value changed with an int. Here's the signature for this. Void function with the type of int value. So you can just use this. However, changed maybe is not the correct terminology for what we're doing. Maybe it's a setter, right? Because we're just trying to set a value. So you can use a value setter. Exactly the same. You see here, exactly the same definition, just the name is different to indicate what it is. That's what types are there for, right? So you see that changed, setter, you've got a getter, so a function that returns a value, iterable filter, you name it, there's functions in the framework, function definitions for it, right? There's quite a few. But these are the common ones you'll see: value setter, value getter, value changed, and void callback. Anyway, so coming back to
That's cool to me. Thank you, Simon. I probably speak for a lot of other people, but that's pretty cool. I didn't know those existed.
So yeah, I mean, when you've got common types, like it does save a lot. And same goes for your own types. You can generic any type. So that's another benefit. But hopefully that kind of answers the originating question here from Laser. That's all.
Now he had a follow up on that, which I answered in the chat. But yeah, his follow up was basically, what if the functions were outside the widget? And I'm actually doing that a little bit in my.
I mean, the function is outside the widget. Am I the bottom widget?
Yeah,
I mean, the top one up here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, as long as it's in scope, you're okay.
I mean, you can pass it in, right? So here's another thing: I can have a level.
He's talking about passing it in from another file or a completely different function, I think, so that they have separate build methods.
It could be like a global, for example, if you need it for whatever reason, you could have that. I mean, as long as it's in scope, you can do it.
I mean, you could just pass in a parameter, right? Maybe am I missing something here?
It was.
So let me just answer this one. Hey there, isn't Flutter regularly creating new instances of widgets when rebuilding? If so, wouldn't that also create new instances of a function in the button widget? Yes. So it does create new instances of widgets, but be very cautious about the term widget here. Widget is the configuration, it's the blueprint. It doesn't contain any functional stuff. And in fact, the way it works is it sets those new parameters, the widget, on the existing element. So there's like very little in terms of reuse and everything else. And yes, it will create a new instance of the function in the situations where you've got like lambdas, for example. If it's a method like these, there's a reason why you want to pull them out and put them into methods. Methods are instanced differently. Methods are instanced with the class. So the same here. This is instanced with this class, this function. So each time this build method is being called, you can see here it's referring to the same thing. It's not creating a new not creating a new lambda each time, right?
Now,
by the way,
the
question was at 30 past, Simon. Or the follow-up question was at 30 past.
Yeah.
I can't bring it up.
What if I wanted the function outside the widget? But that's, yeah, and the original discussion, I think, was about passing it down from the parent.
If you want it outside, just put it outside and pass it in. Yeah. I think maybe you mean the set state. I can see this because the function that you're trying to use, you're trying to set state on the wrong thing. So I think this is about scoping your state. So you can see here, we're scoping state in the sense of widgets, right? If you're trying to have some global state, like some application state, then change this widget, that's the behavior you're looking for, which is a different type of notification. Let me just show you what I'm talking about here.
Right. Well, a couple things real quick, because I'm falling behind here. For one, I think what they might be talking about is calling set state in a parent, which is something people often try to look to do. The other thing, though, is something we used to talk about a long time ago regarding how widgets are refreshed and how it all works. As Simon said, the widget that you write is the blueprint. It creates an element. The element is what is referred to by the render tree in order to render what's on screen. If the widget has not changed, the element will not change. If the element has not changed, then the render tree is just going to show the same thing that was already there. It's not going to re-render it. This is how they do things for efficiency. And the way that you can, well, one quick second, because when you rebuild a widget, when you destroy one that's immutable and rebuild a new one of the advantages that Flutter has is that it does not use, what is it again, Simon? Screen invalidation, where it invalidates a section of the screen. It literally just redraws the actual widget instead of a segment of the screen.
It only has to rebuild the display list of the things that have changed in the layer.
Right.
It has an optimal route of only rebuilding and repainting what it needs to. And in fact, the partial screen validation search is something that's now inside Impeller, so it's even better.
Nice. And Tony, we stopped questions about an hour ago, so that we can get to some live coding.
If it's about live coding, we'll take it, but it has to be about this. Anyway, let's get back to this. Right. So let me get back to the original point here. So Lazar, was asking, what if you want the callback function outside the widget? Now, this is actually a common problem. I completely forget about these things because it kind of just comes second nature. I've been doing this for like 5 years, right? So let me just show you about this. So set state is a member of this state widget. So you're going to need either a reference to this state widget, or you need a way of notifying this widget that its state has changed. These are things. So there's different ways of doing this, right? You can certainly pass. Maybe just have a value and then have separate set state function. There's a ton of different ways. Let me show you. I'll show you the different ways that we can do this, and then we can go through. So first of all, you can actually store the. Sorry, my keyboard has decided to run out of battery on me. There we go. Plug it in.
Not like Simon wears out a keyboard every once in a while.
So what was I saying? Yeah. So you can pass set state as a reference. So let's say we're gonna move our counter state outside the app first of all. So we're gonna lift up our state. So we're gonna make a little class up here, and we'll call it app state. Right. Here's our lovely app state, and that's gonna have our counter and our increase function within it to increase the counter. Right. So we now have a way of modifying our state and our state. Now we need an instance of this. So we can create, this is really janky, but we'll do this. We'll create an instance of app state and pass it into our widget. So this becomes okay, so our app's going to start up. It's going to create an instance of app state. It's going to pass it to the example widget as state, and then it's going to complain.
Constant. It's not constant.
Yeah. And then down here, when we actually want to use that, we can actually make this whole widget stateless. Let's leave it stateful for a second. I'll just show you what I'm talking about. So let's leave it stateful. Yeah, let's have get rid of our counter. I'm going to get rid of our count function. So we want to get a count from widget.state.counter. We'll make that public. In fact, we'll have a so let me be clear about this sort of. I'm putting a getter in because this is in the same file right now, so you can use it as a private member variable because it starts with underscore, means it's private. The point here is that this state is owned by app state, right? This variable is owned by app state. So you don't want to be able to modify it and make mutable changes to your objects, especially your state, outside of the object itself because it doesn't know that something changed. Things don't get notified correctly. This will cause problems. It's always a best idea. So in this case, increase count changes that state and the getter gets that state. But you can't change this state in any other way but calling this instant increase count function now. This means you now have control and you have a contract with how that state's changed. So back down to our function. So now we can now get that state and display it. We want to increase that state. So we could go and pass widget.state.increase the count function over. And we're going. This is buggy. I'm doing this on purpose. So we just migrate that out of the class, right? So what's going to happen when I press the buttons? Any clues, anyone? Da-da-da. First, it did nothing. Second, it did nothing. It is actually incrementing the count, right? So we go up to our function and we say print inc counter, right? What we're going to
do a quick hot reload, and
yeah, that's the hot reload. That's the reason why it's changed, but we'll get there in a second. I'm trying to keep things simple. So if I hit plus, there you go. Right? 4, 5, 6, but the screen's not updating. This is why we need to call set state to notify the widget that the change has occurred, right? So we've got a problem. How do we do that, right? So we can do two things.
Marco is suggesting that you should use find ancestor state of type, but I don't know what's...
That's a whole different thing. That's not what we're trying to achieve here, actually. So, but anyway, so we can do something like this, right? We could say we want to increase our state value, right? And now we're in the item that we want to rebuild. We could call set state here. So this would work. I'm going to restart. Now hit first. And look, now it rebuilds because we update the state, which changes the value of this variable. We call set state. It rebuilds the widget now with this new string, which contains the new value. But look at this. Like if you've got empty set states, bad. It smells bad. It is bad because you're like, well, what is the state that I'm setting? You're just saying rebuild my widget, which is not correct. So how do we make it so that this widget depends on when the state changes, which is actually what you want? You want a reactive UI. You want it to represent what's on the screen. So what do we actually need to rebuild on the screen for the count to change? It's just the text, right? Good. So now what we can do is we can wrap this text widget in a listenable builder. Listenable builder. This is just one of many of the built-in state management things that Flutter has, right? Right.
In addition to all the packages.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rifik, it's providers are declared globally. They can get away with that. Well, I'm answering a comment real quick. One of the reasons that they can get away with that without it being a bad thing is because it doesn't get mutated.
Right. Let's. I want to try to keep us on target of what we're talking about here, not rear off into too many different things. So increase count. So now it's going to complain because, funny enough, state is not listenable. But we can change that. So we're going to extend change notifier, and when our count changes, we're going to notify the listeners that changed. There we go. Right. So now if I restart, what's going to take place is I hit first. Oh, look, it changed, right? Both of them now work again. So we've lifted our app state up. It has a change notifier, which is just a list of functions to call. And it will call those functions we call notify listeners. And it just so happens that the listenable builder, what it does is it listens to that listenable. And when it changes, it rebuilds the child. Thus, you've achieved what you were looking for. Now, this now means that this doesn't even need to be stateful, right? So we can now nuke this whole state bit and make this stateless because we don't hold any widget state, right? There you go. State. Right? Now we can take this one step further, right? Should we take this one step further? Should we go one step further? So we're talking about like buttons. If this button widget was not a generic button widget, but an increase counter widget, right? Increase counter button, right? We can now get rid of our callback from here. This now has a specific job to increase by the amount that we've given it, right? We can now get rid of the fact that we need to pass in a function. And our on tap function itself can now take the place of what that does. So in this case, if we pass in a context, we can do this inline. There's a few different things we can do here, but I'll do this. So what we can now do is go up the tree and find the top level widget that holds our app state. So it is example widget. We don't have that many layers at the moment. Let's just add another layer just so you can see how this works. So we could have a home screen, and we'll rename example widget to page content, I don't know, right? And then this can be a scaffold. Right, and then body page content, right? So just adding that extra, just to be clear. We can now do something quite interesting. So home screen is going to be holding app state. In fact, I might even take this up one more level. We're going to go even deeper to really show how this works. So we can say app. We'll call this my app, example app. That's better. Example app, right? And we're going to take our app out. We shouldn't really have our app in run app. It's just as a test, right? Let's pop that in there. And then this is home screen instead.
All right. I'm gonna need to run. Get back to the day job. Pay some bills.
Okay. Nice to see you.
It's good being here. Thanks, everybody. And hey, I didn't hit the magic red button this week. So
yeah, just press the X button, please.
Great. All right. See you all next
week. The one
week.
that's on the bottom, not the one that's on the top. Right. Thanks for coming.
See ya. So this is exactly the same way we had it before. We've got our app state being passed into example app being our top level. This is this dot state. I'm an idiot. By the way, all of your widgets, all your constructors for all your widgets, stateful or stateless, should be const. If you cannot make them const, you have a bug. I'm warning you now. Because they're just configuration. They shouldn't have any mutable state on them. Anyway, so come in. We'll move moving on here before I go too far down the rabbit hole. All right, so here we go, and we're going to get rid of state from here. So now home screen doesn't have any state. Now, how does the page content access said state, right? So let's make these const, since they don't have changing parameters now, even better. So what we can do is we need a way of getting to the state so that we can use it. So if we go up to the top, I'll put this on our app widget for now, and this will have app state of build context. This is going to what one of the people in the chat was just talking about. So we're going here. Find ancestor widget of exact type. In this case, we'll find example app. So that magical line, what we're doing, I'll show you in use, and then you can see it. Then I should talk you through it. I forgot to write static. There we go. So we can now do example app state of context, right? And down here, we can get counter, like so. And then down here, when we do the on tap, we can do the same thing and do increase count by the increase amount, right? So now all of this is exactly as it was before. So if I restart, obviously we've made things slightly better. Let's replace this with the size box to expand. Right. So first, second, this is all working as expected. So what we're actually seeing here is the app state of, when I run this function, goes to the context and we go up the elements of the tree the find does this. It recurses up the tree until it finds the widget of that type. So it's going to go all the way up to the top of the tree, find this widget that's in the tree, example app, and then we're going to return that reference. That's what this function does. It's just a for loop. In fact, if we go to element, which is the class that implements it, I'll show you it. Yeah, element. There you go. That is the function right there. Gets the parent, checks the parent type against the type you're looking for. If it's not, it says ancestors new parent of the parent, the grandparent as it were, and keeps going up the tree. That's it, walking up the tree until it gets to the top where it's null, and in which case you're going to get null come back. It doesn't exist. That's it. That's as simple as it goes. But here's the problem. Every single time you now run that, it has to do that while loop. The whole idea of inherited widgets is that it has a cache table of the reference to the widget, so he doesn't have to do that walking all the time. He only walks the first time to find it, and then it's registered. So if I go back, there's another way you can do this, which again doesn't involve inherited widgets. We're not going to go there. So another way you can deal with this is quite interesting. So if we now do a mixin, so class, let's call it app state mixin. Sounds good. Mixin on what's it? Type T that extends stateful widget on state of T. So what this is doing is making a mixin that we can point any state class, right? Now inside here, we can now have a getter which returns app state. App state. Wherever we are, we can now call, if we have this mixin, we can call this. And then what we can now do is have a locally cached version of an app state. App state. And if we now add this, we could call it inside there. So let's just call it inside here. Let's grab our, what was it, build. I forget what it was. It was example app, that's the one. So now we can say app state or this. So that magical line, what we're saying is that when you call the getter app state, return the cached one that's local. And if it's not set it because it's null by default, because it's nullable, set it to the one that's returned by our app state of. Another way you can actually do this exact same functionality is to, so again, this walks the tree when you first access the variable. This means you can't access it in certain places because the context may not be mounted. You could cache it each time, walk the tree for every widget at least once. So another one you could do is you could overwrite init state and then just set app state then, right? So you can set it then like that. It's never nullable. It's just late. And you can always return that from your getter, right? Now, let me show you, like, that's just another way of doing it. The problem here now is, as you can probably guess, every single widget that implements app state mixin is going to go look up the app state and cache it. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. Normally on request is kind of what you want because you probably don't need to use it all the time. So we're going to go wind this back. There's actually a slightly simpler way of doing this top section, which I'll show you now. So you can do this exact same logic by just doing late final app state equals this. So what you're now saying is when you first access app state, it will then, because it's late, that's what the late does. When you first access it, it then runs the initializer, which is the right-hand side here. And because it's final, it only does it the first time. Okay. Anyway, so now we've got this lovely thing in here. We can now write app state counter. Whenever we have this before, we can just put app state. And let me just show you this, and then I'll show you some other fix me up. So the reason why app state's not working yet is because we haven't implemented it. And I've implemented it on state. So now if I say with app state mixin, magically, our app state getter, look, no error. That now links to that variable, which was the cache of app state. So if we now pop that on our states, it all works, no errors. Let's restart, make sure it still works. Button 1, button 2, all our buttons work, lovely. So this has one other slightly, the problem with this now is that we always have to use state for widgets, even when we don't want state. We don't want that all the time. So another way you can achieve the same thing. Now remember, we do have state. It's app state, right? So this variable is being stored in this state class, right? If you don't want to do that, then you could just make a widget that it just does this one thing that supplies app state, like a builder, right? And that would work just the same way, right? That you can look it up. It's about how you want to write your code, not necessarily how it works. So another example of this would be making an extension on context, but it does not cache it, right? So this is why, like, the notion of inherited widget and these other things, all they're doing is abstracting away that concept out of your immediate work. So you're just making a what's the word? You're just moving the code around. Like, all the code always still has to be called, but you're just moving around to simplify the code that you have to do and less boilerplate. The more you have, the simpler you can make your code on a day-to-day basis, right? So to achieve your goals, you abstract things away, right? All right, so here's another one, extension, and we can say app state extension on build context. And this can actually have another one. This is going to have an app state getter that can do the same thing on context, but there'll be this because we're on the context itself. And we can subtly change this one above to being context.appstate. Right? So it does the same thing. Now, by doing those two lines, now what we can do is, if we want to, on a stateless widget, if we want to access it without having a cache on the variable, if we don't use it all that often, normally that's fine. So we make the stateless. We can now just do context.appstate, right? Because it's an extension line. But if you notice, this is doing what we had originally, which was example app state up. We're just moving it out so it looks cleaner. Still doing the same thing, right? Now, let's do the same thing down here. We can get rid of we can make this back to stateless, being stateless.
Okay. Now I'm going to have to run here shortly, but I just wrote a refactored version of the counter app to show a different way to have a child change the state of the parent. It's as simple as can be. So, you hit a break, I'll just show that real quick, and then unfortunately I do need to run.
So here we go. Again, increase counter, context.app state, and it works. It does the same thing. But what we have done is we've lost that cache effectively. So what the advantage of having a inherited widget is that it provides that cache for you. So I'll show you how to use inherited widget. And remember, we're not using any state classes here. We're not using any state management, here. This is just all what's built into Flutter, right? There's no special package to do anything, right? All right, let's, do you want to show what you were talking about?
Yep, just real quick. This is the simplest version I know of to have a child change the state of the parent. So all we have here is we have a parent widget. It has counter. This is the same exact thing. I didn't rewrite it. In fact, I just slightly refactored it. So it's the private method that increments the counter. That's great. This is all straight out of the example. The only thing I've changed here is I've added a child widget instead of the floating action button. So in this, I'm just passing the increment counter method. easy as can be. And all this is a text button that runs the counter method. But you can see this is the child widget. So what's happening here is it's not passing a separate instance of increment counter. It's passing the same instance. So that when you press the button on this, you're actually calling this function, not a different instance of it. You're calling that instance. And as you can see, the child widget in the button is changing the counter here without any different state management or whatnot. And yes, you can move that child widget out into another file. It will still work. That's it.
You have to be careful with the mechanism passing down your function pointers, because I'm just talking to the audience here. Like in terms of you end up passing it to from one widget to the next widget to the next widget to the next widget. As soon as you find yourself handing all these parameters down your widget hierarchy, you're probably doing it wrong at that point.
Yes,
right?
Which is why state management exists, so that you're not passing all this stuff all the way down. This is just a simple case where if you need to do it in one place, if you've got a bunch of these going on, don't do it this way. That's the whole reason state management systems exist. All right. And with that, hey, look, if we had only thought of that sentiment, Simon.
Oh.
So many different ways to handle things.
Yep.
All right. You all have a good one. I've got some errands to run, and I will be around. I will be around on the 26th. So I don't know about anyone else.
Well, no, but not 26th. It's 20th is the next one, right?
20th is the next one, yes.
Yeah. So what we'll do, just so everyone know the Christmas schedule, next week will be the last show before Christmas, and then they'll be back in the new year on the 3rd. So we're going to miss the one on the 27th.
Okay, sounds good. Then I'll take the one on the 27th off.
Cool. Unless people really want us to come back and do some live coding over Christmas, and if people are available, then we might drop in. But otherwise, I don't want to. We're not requiring everyone.
The lady of the house here has to work on that day, so I could do it.
All right, we'll see.
All right. In the meantime, 2 hours and 10 minutes, and I think Simon's just getting warmed up. So I will catch you all later, and have a great day.
See you later. And then there was one. All right. You still got people here? Still interested? So I guess let's see what we've got going on here. So I think are people interested in learning a bit more about inherited widgets? Do we want an inherited widget in here? I'm seeing a few yeps and stuff. All right. So just another one. So we'll make a simple inherited widget that allows us to supply the app state down the tree, and this can then also is cached internally by the framework, and then we won't have to be worried about having to cache that with the app state mixing. However, you've got that if you want it. So first things first, we need a widget to supply the state down the tree. So it's going to be really simple to do this. We just actually, I think I have a template in here. Actually, is it I inherited widget? That's going to bug me now. Where's IHW? 1 second. Let's see if I can get this. I'll give my settings. Let's have a look. I have some live templates. INH. See, I'll get it right one day. INH. There we go. So, and we'll call this app state scope. And this is going to supply app state. So if you notice on this little template here, we're getting the same thing that we did earlier, a static variable. And we're going to look up the app state, not the scope. I don't really care for the scope. And we'll get the state out of that app state. This is the old function. It's now depend on inherited widget of exact type. I haven't updated the template. Anyway, I should probably go do that actually. I'll forget otherwise. It's just here. Yep. All right. So this now says the widget, the context that we're passing in is now going to depend on this scope, right? And then the times that we want to change this scope, which, it's complaining because it's changed its name, but old widget. That's in my template as well. I'm going to fix it. All right. Anyway, so and if we needed to update the children, have them automatically rebuild, then we would put our state change in here. Since we're using a change notifier, we don't need to do this because it's got its own notification mechanism to rebuild. But I'll show you the downsides. I'll show you the ways that this works in both ways so that you can see the differences. So now we've got this scope. If we go into our app widget, we can now wrap our material app with this scope and supply it down the tree, just like that. Just like that. Let's call this app state. I don't like it. There we go. And then we're going to get rid of this function since we want to use the inheritor widget now. And this all becomes app state scope instead of app example app. That's it. So the extension will cache it anyway. We have our build context get it using the inheritor widget, and wherever we used it with our getter now is updated. So if I restart, we should have a working counter. There you go, using an inherited widget. Now, we're not taking full advantage of the inherited widget now, right? So let's go back. So this update should notify is the piece that really confuses people, right? Like when this widget, the scope widget, is rebuilt with a new value, it will run this function. So the fact that this is a change notifier makes no difference, right? So it's if the app state itself was changed. So in our use case, what we're actually doing right now is using inherited widget as a provider. That kind of makes sense. There's only ever going to be one, and it doesn't ever rebuild the children. So this won't, because of the false, it's never going to rebuild the children when the app state changes. We're listening to the app state itself. So it's a very subtle problem. I tried to explain to someone else the other day. It's very subtle. This inherited widget will rebuild the children when this content, when this variable itself changes, the one that's passed into here, because that's the one that we use and should notify, right? So I can here, this can be if app state does not equal old widget.app state, right? But if you think about this, this is what we should be normally, right? Which it will always be false. It will always be false right now because it's always the same. Because we never create a new instance of app state, right? We're modifying the existing state. It's mutable. Now, if we were to make app state immutable and use a copy with premise, then that would be a workable. This would be a workable thing. So, yes, this. So the fact that this is a change notifier means it's notifying its children automatically, right? So there's no need for the inherited widget to do the notification for us. And the reason for this, if I scroll back down, remember we put in a listenable builder. The listenable builder listens to the change notify and rebuilds its children. These buttons don't get rebuilt, right? These buttons don't get rebuilt when the state changes. Like we can't, if we wanted to say, if app state, if context.appstate.counter is less than five, then we want to show the button, right? First button, right? So if I restart, it's on the screen, 0, and I go to 5. Wait a minute, the button's still there. That's because we're not this widget where we have this if statement, right, is not being rerun each time the app state is being changed. The count is being changed. So it can't reevaluate the conditional statement. So we need this entire widget to change when that happens. So what we can do, and there's a different way of dealing with this, and I'll go into how this changes in a minute. What we can do is use that we can make app state itself immutable, and then whenever it changes, we can have it notified down the tree. Another way of dealing with this is to actually make counter itself. I know we're using counter as a variable here, but you can imagine this being like the currently logged in user or some other state. So it's more than just an integer. Then again, we could have that, so we supplying that with a scope down the tree, and when the current logged in user changes, it would rebuild all the widgets then. So there's various different ways of dealing with this, and I think making this immutable is probably the next best thing. So let's get rid of passing it in main. This is always not something you really want to do. And let's get rid of it as a, I've got this a bit further down. Let me move this down here. Right, so on the example app, we're going to get rid of our app state being passed in, and we're going to make it stateful. So something needs to own the variable, right? So it's either in the main function where the variable is scoped, or it's here in the example app. So we're going to scope it here in the example app. So we'll have app state, and it's going to be late. And when we initialize our example app, we're going to build our initial example app state, and that's that. So we need to understand when we need to notify the children that the change occurred. We can use our change notify for that. So in this case, in here, we can now register for that change notify to take place, to actually happen. The best way of dealing with this, I guess. This is where it becomes really awkward, and it's the difference between the object that changes and the scope of the object that changes. I'll show you a couple of different things, and we'll come to it, right? So app state dot add listener on app state changed, and we always need to make sure we dispose. So this is what this is us tidying up our. We no longer want that anymore, and our app state changed could then essentially rebuild and say set state, right? You can already smell the bad smell here, right? So basically, each time app state counter changes, is going to notify its listeners, which is this is one of them. It will cause the set state, which will cause this build method to run. Now, when it comes into the actual app state scope, well, it's still the same object. See the problem here? If we really want to adjust the app state itself, well, we need a way of managing that. So this becomes, again, this is the difference between this being a model object and it being a management object, right? Something that's managing the app state. So we're gonna change things around here slightly. So we're gonna make another app. We're gonna rename this class to app state repository for now, and our actual app state is going to contain our counter, and it's going to be read only. So now we've got an immutable app state. Yeah? And then when it comes to our repository, this can hold onto the app state itself. So this is the actual place where we have this. And we'll have a getter for the state. And if we want to update the counter, well, we need to make a new instance of app state. So we do a copy with so this is kind of a standard pattern if people don't know. The idea being that you can pass in optional parameters. If we had multiple fields in here, we can do color or something in a minute. But the idea is that you supply the current value if the passed in value is null. So that's your kind of expected behavior when we're doing required. There we go. So is everyone following this? Hopefully you are. Doesn't need to be bigger. Anyway, so now we have our immutable object. We can actually mark this as immutable. It's always good to do that. And this will, the compiler and the tooling will tell you if you make it mutatable by mistake. So for example, if I put a variable that can mutate, it's going to complain and tell me that there's a problem, right? Because it's not an immutable object anymore. All right, so now we've got this. When we create our app state repo, we'll have it take the ownership on the variable. So it can initialize state to being a blank app state with a counter value of 0. Okay. All right, so you can also do something like put this, just to show you can also do something like this and put this in here and say static initial. Interesting. Anyway, so just to be clear, that's just a nice way of just saying, just giving it a name. So this is the initial state. Okay, so now we've done that. How do we increase? Well, we say state equals the current state, copy with the current state's counter, the current state's counter plus our increase value. And we'll also print off that new value whilst we're here. And notify our listeners, why not? Right. So what we've now done is we've lifted up our app state into an immutable object, whatever this might be, right? So you can imagine this could be user, it could be a lot of things. We've got our change notify on here still. Our app state now becomes, our app state disappears from here. And instead what we want to do, is create an app state repository, something to manage our app state, right? App state manager, app state, whatever you want to call it. So we could also cache the last, latest. Again, it all depends on how you want to run this, right? But latest app state, let's say, repo. And when we get our app state repo changed, right? This is the repository changed. Then we could say the latest repo is the one that's from the app state. And that's the one that we're then using in here. It's a bit convoluted, but just bear with me on this one. I just want to try and show you some different ways of approaching this, right? Again, I'm just rebuilding the same thing over and over and over again here that does all the same things, right? There's different ways of approaching for many different reasons, right? It all depends on how big your app gets to how you need to manage your state, right? Simple things, simple solutions. All right, so down to where we want to go to. App state, where is it, of? Why do I have an error? Oh yeah. So we've got this app state, but now the increase count isn't a thing, right? And then app state repo, the app state itself is not listable anymore, right? It doesn't change itself. Its values, internal value doesn't change. It's the repository that changes. So we need to make a few changes here. So let's do that. So we've got an app state repo mixin and an app state repo extension. Let's do this. This is why it gets really complicated when you try to inherit a widget. We'll get there in a second. I'll show you the nice way of doing this, but I just want to get it working, and then we'll refactor it. It's because we don't even need it in here. Let's get rid of that. Just making things more complicated right now. Let's do that. Let's go to example app and pop it on there. It's going to be the same problem, isn't it? I'll solve this a different way in a minute. Just I don't want to detract from what we're doing. So we'll have to take repo. Okay, so absolutely repo. Oh yeah. All right, back down to where we were. That's going to work now because the repo itself is listenable. And our we'll get there in a second. Okay. So right, after all of that, one more, we'll get there. Okay, restart. That's my fault. Okay, first, yeah, see, went to do it again. I went a bit too quick there. So second and first, and when we get to more than 4, the button disappears. Yay! So what's happening now is our app state scope is getting a different app state instance being sent over to it. Therefore, it causes it to rebuild the children that have registered to it. And there's any function, any element or build context essentially that calls this of method, right? Because that's what depends. That's what links it up. Now, if you notice, they're actually depending on the repo itself, not on the. It's the repo that they're actually depending. that is being returned back, and that's the thing that can be listened to and everything else. And again, we can now also, just to be clear, we can now actually also get rid of this being listenable. So we can now get rid of this. And we're kind of getting into this. So that will still work, because now if I restart, see, because it's the access of this getter, which is essentially registering this build context here that we're getting it from, which will cause this build function to run. Yeah. So I think there's one, I mean, this isn't great, to be honest. This isn't, you can see this is really complicated. We just want a nice simple way of saying, give me the app state, and it just works, right? We shouldn't need to go get it from the repository. This is because what we actually want to do is there's a couple of places where we actually want to use this. So we can just make a simple app state, and it just shortcuts it, right? That's all you're doing. There you go. Right. And the same could be said for this here. This could be app state repo.state. And this is just going to return the app state itself. It's inside the repository. And now, you know, we can simplify that. Hasn't really changed anything, if you notice. Like, it hasn't, like, we're just moving out, making it look nicer, right? Fundamentally, it functions the same. But we need the repo. The reason why we're keeping it is because down here, the function itself is on the owner of the app state, right? So that we can notify that it's changed properly. So coming back to this whole sort of notification and change, the only thing that actually needs to listen to this is the top level, because it needs to know that it's changed. There's a couple of different ways that we can actually send those values down to the app. And as you know, we've done this thing here with the latest app state and all this. Now we could, this is kind of not great, right? Like, it's not really cementing the two things together quite nicely. The latest app state is so that we can actually manage our state correctly, right? So in this case, when our state change occurs, that's when we capture the state, and that is the thing that we're actually rebuilding with, right? This would be the correct way to do it. The way that you probably see people doing is this, right? Now, not to say this isn't totally incorrect, right? But there's a slightly different approach here, right? It's very subtle, right? So, sorry. Right, so that's still going to work, right? But there you go. But the premise here is that, you know, why am I rebuilding for what, right? What has changed, right? The code isn't clear on that point, right? And then down here, I'm getting the state, but now it's as it existed when this function was called, this build function, not when the actual state was changed by the listener, right? So there's subtle things like that that can catch you up. So anyway, there is a slightly better approach here. So there's two things that we're actually trying to achieve here with this one scope, and that's the reason why these two variables exist. We need to be able to get to the repository so that we can access the functions to change the state, and then we want to be able to rebuild the UI based on state. Those two things I'm achieving with one inherited widget here, which is actually not correct or not great. We might want to depend, one widget might want to depend on the repo, because the repo has itself, well, the repo doesn't actually change, right? The instance is static throughout the entire life cycle of the app. But we might want to cache it, as we were saying earlier, or equally, we don't need to rebuild the UI when it changes. Okay, so let's separate these off. This is the bit I didn't irked at when I was just building just a second ago. So when we call app state scope, we're just going to return back the app state, right? This is how it should be. This is clear. It only rebuilds when the app state changes. And why is this having a problem? Oh, because ignore me. Right. So, so that's going to sort out the app state. Great. So that will solve this bottom one here. We no longer actually have to, we can just call get app state, it'll come from there. And then the repository, we still do the same thing, but frankly, what we had earlier where it traverses the tree is just fine. So if we now get rid of it from here, we'll come back to that in a second. We can tidy that up. Yeah, where am I? Yeah, I want to do dependent. Let's do this. So again, it's example app that owns the repository. So we'll do an app state repo here. App state repo. Obviously, app state repo, I'm just calling it that. Obviously, business logic, manager, whatever it is, you wouldn't create, I'm just calling it app state repo. You wouldn't create a repo for each state, just to be clear. But it's whatever you have for your backend functionality, right? We could change this in a minute for maybe logged in, logged out. I can show you how to do that. I don't know. I need your feedback, by the way, so pop it in the chat. So anyway, in this case, it's going to be find ancestor widget of exact type and state of exact type. And this will be example app state. And then we want to get app state repo. So this is using the same technique we used earlier. And now we can still have the same cache for the repo. Because the two things that, again, are independent and separate of each other. So there we go. So that's fixed up now. So slightly nicer. So we press the button and it disappears and keep pressing second. It all works as expected. And the difference here is that when we ask for the repository, it's doing that looping up the tree to find the that instance, that singular instance of, in this case, this state object, and then get an app state repo from that. And then the other one is providing a rebuild, automatic rebuild when that changes, so we don't have to have a change notifier, right? So the reason for having the change notifier right now is not for the entire UI stack to have to do it. They can if they want to, anything in the UI. It's there so that we can notify that something inside the repo has changed, so that we can rebuild those scope widgets at the top level, which in turn rebuild all the dependent widgets. That's the individual widgets that in your UI that would essentially register by using those context getters. So there's a slightly better way of doing this. So as I said earlier, we got this like listener thing. It's like kind of there. So we just redo what we did earlier. We're just moving it around now. So we wrap this in a listenable builder. And child. We pass the child across so we don't have to rebuild all these widgets. Type these. And now this means that we can now get rid of our listener and the whole scope there. And if we want to be a bit dastardly, we could do this. Clean things up a little bit. Right. So now we're relying. Yeah, still works. And the way this is working now is it's this listenable widget that does that listen. If we go into it, it does exactly what we were doing. If we go actually look at what it does under the hood, he says, animate, it's just an animate widget, but it's the same thing. So if you go under the hood of animate widget, look what it does. Listenable, add listener, handle change. Dispose, remove listener, handle change. When handle change, set state. Yeah, this will state, it's to build our widget. And it builds the widget. Exactly what we're doing. It's just again abstracted it away, right? So our code is simple. The premise of what we're trying to achieve is easier, right? And in this case, we're only rebuilding the scope widget when it changes. So hopefully, I think is that a stopping point? Are people happy with that? There is, I mean, there is that kind of notion. I feel like calling that app state repo is not really a good terminology. And it certainly doesn't really show off what is actually going on here. I mean, a counter works, but it's not like the greatest example. I know. I'll pop this in a gist, I think, and then we'll wrap up the show. Unless anyone's got any questions. Let's get that in there. Right, where did we put the last one? What's today's date? It is 13th. Right, it's in the chat there. If anyone wants to go to it, pop up the stream. So, thank you for dropping by, I guess. And I hope you enjoyed that. I found that interesting. Yeah, and maybe we can. I was hoping to do some layout stuff, but we didn't get to that. But I think we've been going on long enough. So maybe we'll do that next stream. Let's see. Maybe just saying Christmassy. That might be fun. All right. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. If I find the button.